Hi folks, and welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to show you how to install Windows 95 in VirtualBox. Also, at the same time with this video, there will be a second video published to show you how to get 256 color graphics and internet. It's going to show up in the top right now as a card. It will also be in the description, and it will also show up at the end. So without any further ado, let's get started. Alright, so what you need in order to install Windows 95 in VirtualBox. Well, first of all, you need VirtualBox, and you can download it on virtualbox.org. This link will also be in the description of the video. And also you will need the ISO or floppy disk images for Windows 95. The files are from winworldpc.com, and I will link this in the description. And you can select any of these versions. It will work with any of these versions, the installation that we're doing. But we're going to use OSR2. Now you can also go with the retail package and get the floppy disk images, or you can get the ISO, but we're going to use the ISO for OSR2 for one important reason, and we're not going to use the floppy disks. Well, to simply put it this way, there are 14 floppy disks, and we have to keep swapping all of them in order to install Windows 95, but there is only one ISO, and this is going to make it much easier to install Windows 95 if we only have one disk to play with. So let's go over what files you will need. Well, first of all, you will need MS-DOS 6.22, and this folder here will be archived as a zip. You will also need the Fixed 95 CPU ISO. This is a compatibility layer for Windows 95, and the reason is simple. Modern hardware runs on 64-bit processors, and I'm talking desktop hardware, not ARM processors. And they do have the x86 instruction set that Windows 95 needs, but they are a little bit beyond the processors of that age, and Windows 95 doesn't know to handle those in its kernel, and thus it will crash. So we're going to use this ISO to fool Windows 95 to actually get the CPU. This is a patch basically to get the CPU to run in backwards compatibility mode for Windows 95. That on the virtual machine, not your actual hardware. We're talking about the virtualized process. We'll also need the ISO for Windows 95, and inside that archive there'll also be a text file, a notepad file, that will contain our license key, and this is from winworldpc.com, as I said. Now, if you do choose to go with the floppy drives, this is the folder you'll get. And you can see here we have 14 disks. We have the boot disk and the 13 installation disks, the floppy disks, and in one of these images, there also is this license key here. This is an actual license key. Since this is abandonware, it doesn't really have any legal issues because it's so old and it's no longer sold. So let's get started with installing Windows 95. So we're going to open up VirtualBox, and we're going to click on New to create a new virtual machine, and we're going to call it Windows 95. Now we're going to hit Next. Sorry, we already named it. Okay, so we're going to click Next, and we're going to put in the amount of RAM. Now, I'm recommending you to stay under 512 megabytes, and the reason is because Windows 95 does not officially support more than 512 megabytes. At around, some people manage to make it work with 2 gigabytes, and there is a patch for more, but it's really not necessary for Windows 95. So I do recommend you to stay under 512, and even 256 like this will be more than enough for Windows 95. So once we put in the amount of RAM, we're going to click Next, and we're going to create a virtual hard drive. So we're going to hit Create, and we're going to select the format we want. I'm going to leave it by default to VDI, and we're going to click Next. Here you can select any of the two, dynamically allocated or fixed size. The difference is really in speed, but it doesn't make any difference on Windows 95, so I'm going to go with dynamically allocated because it will take much less time to create. Now, if you do want to know more about these two, there is this text here on VirtualBox that will also explain you the difference in what advantages it does have, but you should be fine with any of the two. So let's click Next and put in the size. Now, 2 GB, the default, it is more than enough for Windows 95, and I don't recommend you to go beyond that. Now, already for 2 GB, it's on large file support. So we're going to leave it like this on 2 GB, and we're going to change the location for our virtual hard drive. We're going to put it here, and I'm going to click Save. So let's hit Create, and it created our virtual machine. But we're not done yet. We still have some settings to modify. So let's go to Settings. And now what we need to modify is we need to add one more CPU core. This is not mandatory, you can live without it, but I do recommend you to add another CPU core, especially if you have more than a dual core, if you have more than 2 cores on your actual computer. So we're going to go with 2 cores to improve our performance. And in order to make this work with both cores, we're going to have to enable I/O APIC. Now we're going to go to Display, and we're going to select the amount of VRAM, and 64 megabytes should be enough. I don't recommend putting a lot more. We'll also enable 3D acceleration and leave this on VirtualBox VGA, the default. This looks good on storage, and now we're going to go to audio. So enable audio, it is ticked, and also we got audio output to our speakers. You want the host audio driver to be on Windows Direct Sound, and the audio controller on some virtual machines, depending on what you select, it will be on AC97, but you do want it on Sound Blaster 16, and that is because it will work out of the box, because the Sound Blaster was a very popular sound card at that time. Most games of the time support it, and also does Windows 95. Under Network, we're going to enable Network Adapter and put it on NAT, and this will work perfectly fine for us to access the internet. Under USB, we're going to disable the USB controller, and now we can hit OK with all the settings done. So now we can hit Start to start the virtual machine. Now it started on my other monitor, and it prompts me to select a startup disk. Now what you want to do here is just hit Cancel for the moment. Now I can bring it to my monitor here that you can see. And now it's going to say that there was no bootable medium found, and this is perfectly normal. So what we need to do now is install MS-DOS. So we're going to go to Devices, Floppy Drives, and we're going to go to Choose a Disk File. And we're going to choose from this folder, MS-DOS 6.22, and we're going to hit disk number 1. Now go to Machine and hit Reset. Once we get to this screen, what we're going to do is just go to hit Enter to continue. We're going to go to Configure Unallocated Space, and now we're going to hit Enter. It's going to start formatting our C drive. And now here you can change the settings for date and time, and country and keyboard layout. But I'm going to just change the country right now. What does it prompt me with? The list is very short, so we're going to just leave it to United States and hit the settings are correct. Now it doesn't really matter what country you select, but I generally like to select the correct country. So now we're going to select our DOS folder. It's going to be on the C partition, the one it just formatted, and in the folder DOS. So we're going to hit enter. And now it's going to prompt us for disk number 2. So we're going to go to Devices, Floppy Drives, and choose a disk file. We're going to choose disk number 2. Now, if you want, and you do have actual physical disks and a drive to read these, you can use your disks to install DOS or Windows. But we're going to use the files provided because we don't have such. So we're going to go to Devices because it prompts us for disk 3, Devices, Floppy Drives, and choose a disk file. And we're going to select disk number 3 and hit enter. With this done, we're going to go to Devices because it prompts us to remove all floppy disks. We're going to go to Floppy Drives and remove disk from virtual drive and hit enter. And hit enter again to start in MS-DOS. And you will see that now it started in MS-DOS, and this is actual MS-DOS 6.22. So we're going to go to Devices and go to Optical Drives because we're using a CD to install Windows 95. So we're going to go to Optical Drives and go choose a disk file. And we're going to choose our disk file from the desktop. And now we're going to go to Machine and Reset. So it's going to boot from the CD. Now it's going to start the Windows 95 setup. And what we're going to do is get your mouse on the screen of the VM and click on it. And now it's going to prompt you to capture your inputs. So what this does, it's capturing your mouse input and forwards it to the virtual machine, and also the function keys on your keyboard and other various keys and combos that are just going to be used by your host OS. So what we need to do now is press F3 to exit the setup. Right? And we're going to press F3 again to quit. Why we're doing this is because in the previous video where we installed Windows 95, we installed directly from the disk, and apparently Windows 95 doesn't like it that much in modern hardware with modern RAM, and especially in VirtualBox, and it cannot access all the files from the disk because they're not all loaded in the RAM, and because of that, it's got some read issues, and that's why some setups froze. In the last video, I've got quite some comments about it, that their setup froze. And also some other issues with files not found. So what we're going to do is, you can see we can access our C drive here. And what we're going to do is going to list the directories on the C drive with the command dir. And you can see there is no Win95 folder as is on the CD, the X drive. That's how it's mounted. You can see it's on X drive folder Win95. And what we're going to do is going to create a folder exactly like that. We're going to copy the Win95 folder from the CD to our C drive, and we're going to install Windows 95 from our C drive, because that way we can access all the driver files, all the DLLs, everything that we need, and we're going to not have any errors. So to create the Win95 directory on C, we're going to use the command mkdir. Can't see my keyboard. So mkdir, mkdir, make directory, Win95. And when we run the command again, you can see we have the directory, but now it's empty. So we need to copy everything from the CD to this directory. We're going to do this with the following command, copy. So we're going to select our source. So our CD, X drive, it might be on A if you're using the floppy disks. We're going to use the folder Win95 as source. And to select all the files, we're going to run star. So all file names with all extensions. And we're going to select the destination, C drive, Win95, and that is our destination. And we're going to hit enter. And now you can see it copies all the files from the CD over to our C drive, to our virtual hard drive. And now we can actually get to install Windows 95. So to do that, now we want to release our mouse, our inputs from capturing to the virtual machine, so the keyboard and mouse. To do that, you might notice in the bottom right of our VirtualBox window, it's written right control. So we're going to press that key that's written there, right control, and it's going to release our inputs from the capture. So what we need to do now is go to Devices, Optical Drives, and remove disk from virtual drive. And now we're going to go to Machine and reset. This is just like unplugging your computer and plugging it back in to its power source. So what we're going to do now is go and run the setup. So we're going to go CD, so that's to go in the folder, Win95, and then we're going to run setup. Now we're going to press enter as it's prompted. And you can see we run in this Windows 95 setup window. Now don't get fooled, this is actually not the Windows 95 kernel running. It's more of an interface for DOS right now. At the point we're actually booting from the Windows 95 kernel, we're going to need to apply that fixed 95 CPU ISO, that patch, in order to make it run properly. So we're going to click continue. We're going to hit yes to accept the license agreement. And we're going to click next. And here we're going to select the directory to install Windows 95. We're going to leave it by default to C Windows. So click next. You can hit anything here, but I'm going to go with typical. And now we need to input our license key. So we're going to release our inputs and get the key. And I'm going to put it on the other screen so I can type it in. And I'm going to type it in. Numlock, it's not enabled. So 34698 0039 682 and 72135. Why isn't it working? So 72135. We're going to hit next. We're going to input a name for probably the user. So we're going to leave blank for company. And now we can select the hardware that we want installed. Now, obviously, we want sound. That's why in the settings, we selected the Sound Blaster. So we're going to select sound, MIDI, or video capture card. We're going to also select the network adapter because we do want internet access. So as I said, I'm going to show you how to get internet working in the next video. And we're going to also select our CD-ROM drive because we want to mount ISOs. So we're going to click next. And now it's going to start installing. Now at this point, probably, if I remember correctly, it's going to start asking for disk number 2, 3, and other succeeding disks. It's going to actually ask you to change disks. So this is why we're doing it this way. We're doing it by copying everything to the C drive. Even if you do it with the floppy drives, I do recommend you to copy their content, all of them, in the C Windows 95 directory, Win95, so that you can actually install everything in one go and without running into errors. If you might have watched the previous video, it did run into some errors because it didn't find some DLLs, and to some it actually even froze. So by this method, by copying everything to the C drive, we are making the chances of that happening very small, actually to none. Now we're going to go to install the most common components and hit next. And we're going to go with I don't want a startup disk. And we're going to hit next and next. Now it's going to just start copying files. And when it does restart, it's going to actually go from the Windows 95 boot, and we're going to need to apply the fixed 95 CPU. So we're going to click Finish and click OK. And you can actually see this resembles the Windows 3.1 Windows with this kind of close. So we're going to hit OK. And now when it does boot, you'll see that it halts. So you can see Windows protection error. And that is because of our processor, because Windows 95 doesn't really know how to deal with it. So we're going to fix this now. So go to Devices, go to Optical Drives, and choose a disk file. And we're going to go with this fixed 95 CPU that I'm going to link in the description, of course. And now we're going to go with Machine once it's mounted and Reset. Now it's going to boot from this patch disk that we mounted. And what we need to do, you can see here, high-speed processor support setup. We're going to press any key to continue. We're going to hit N because we don't want to see the README. We're going to hit any key to continue. And now it has been installed successfully. So we're going to press any key to restart computer. Then remove the disk. So it restarted, and we're going to go Machine. We're going to go Devices, Optical Drives, and remove the disk. And now go to Machine and Reset to restart it. And now we're going to continue the Windows 95 setup. So we're going to go ahead and select Normal. That's all because we pressed Reset. So now you can see the windows look different. They look like the Windows 95 windows. And we're going to hit OK, and we're going to put a workgroup. And the computer description VM, because it's a virtual machine. So we're going to go Close. You can put anything you want. Now at this point, normally it would find some missing files if we were installing from the disk, but because we have it on our C drive, you can see it found it. And it also found it from DOS, from ndis.vxd. So we're going to just go and keep this file. It just copies everything that it needs, and everything works as expected because it doesn't have any read issues because of the disk, because of the modern hardware, because of the virtual machine. So this extra step that I found, that copying the files over to C, actually does help. So we're going to select our time zone. And hit Next. And it's going to just add a printer, but we don't have a printer because this is a VM, so we're going to hit Cancel and hit OK. Now these steps, that actually copying the files over to C and figuring out why it crashed, so those freeze issues, are because it took me a lot to actually research this problem, to actually find a workaround, a lot of digging on the internet, and I eventually found it and decided to do the updated video. I actually looked for, I think, a month for these fixes. So let's put a username and a password. And now we're going to confirm the password. And now it finished setting everything up. So you can see now we have Windows 95, and in the next video, I'm going to show you how to install the graphics drivers to get 256 colors, and also how to configure it for internet. So thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. So see you next time on HowToIT.